Hey guys, welcome to Franklin Woodworks. I finally got around to making a new assembly/outfeed table. This table was designed stealing the best ideas I could find on YouTube and adding a few of my own, giving me a solution that fits the needs of my shop. So, who did I steal from? Well, Ron Paulk, Izzy Swan, Jay Bates, and the Southern Ginger Workshop, just to name some off the top of my head. All of these guys gave me the inspiration I needed to come up with what I needed to fit my situation. So I started out by cutting the parts I'd need for the top. 2 pieces of 3/4-inch birch plywood cut to 36 by 36, and 4 pieces for the sides that are 11 inches wide. I'm going to cut ovals in the sides so I can access the inside of the table for temporary storage so the top of the table can remain clear while I'm working on it. To make the ovals, I created a template using 1/4-inch plywood and various things in my shop to create that shape, and these oval openings, along with the depth of the table, will allow me to place a quarter finish or a cordless drill inside with no issues. Once I had the drawing completed, I cut the drawing in half, used double-sided tape to join the 2 halves together. That way I could cut out each half of the template at the same time and sand it to the final shape, creating a perfect mirror image. All I have to do now is join the 2 sides back together, and I do this with CA glue and tape. My plan was to use the template as a guide for my router with a guide bushing to slowly cut out the ovals. Let me stop right here and tell you this was a bad plan. My thinking was that this would be no different than using a circle jig, but obviously I didn't think it through. This is nothing like a circle jig. A circle jig is a rigid guide for your router. With a circle jig, the router cannot tilt. It can't move anywhere you don't want it to move. It only goes sideways. Holding a router by hand is completely different, and the result was that I broke a $40 spiral bit. Fortunately, that was the only consequence, and I wasn't injured. Routers scare me. They scare me worse now, and I'm disappointed that I didn't think it through before I came up with this plan. What I did next was what I should have done from the beginning, and used the template to draw out the oval, cut reasonably close to the line with a jigsaw, then use a flush trim bit and the template to clean up the opening using a router table. Much faster, easier on the router and the bits, and way safer. Also wanted to be able to use clamps on the top of the table, but I didn't want to have to buy specialty clamps. I want to be able to use my cheap Harbor Freight clamps with no modifications. So I figured out some random places for slots that wouldn't impact the rigidity of the tabletop. I made a template, used a jigsaw, then a flush trim bit to get perfect slots. A gentle round over will make sure that nothing catches on the edges when I use this as an outfeed table. Remember how cheap I am? Normally on a table of this design, you would have a cross pattern in the middle of the table for stability and rigidity, but I only had a little plywood left from the 1 sheet I was using for the build. So I figured out the center, mounted that extra piece to the bottom with glue and screws, then went about attaching the sides using glue and brad nails. Although the center bracing may be a little odd, since the table is only 36 by 36, this center brace will keep the tabletop plenty rigid. Remember, this is an assembly table, not a workbench. I've already got one of those. When I attached the top, I made sure that I oriented what bow the plywood had in such a way that, for lack of a better description, it clamped itself to the center support as I attached the top to the sides. A couple of coats of sanding sealer and some light sanding, and now I'm ready to begin the construction of the base. Originally, I was going to make the base an air filtration unit similar to the one I have hanging from my ceiling. But the more I thought about it, Considering where the assembly table was going to be located, along with the inherent lack of portability of that location, the filtration wasn't going to accomplish much. So I scrapped that idea and decided to build something fast and cheap with the notion that I might replace the base in the future with a base with more storage options. I decided to use 2x4s for the legs, but I wanted to make sure they were straight and true. So after cutting the 2x4s to rough length, I jointed one face and one edge of each leg, then ran the legs through the planer to give me parallel faces. By cutting the pieces to rough length first, I minimized the amount of wood I'd have to remove to take out the bow, twist, or cup of each piece. This preserves as much wood as possible. Then I finished up the milling process by running each through the table saw, shaving off just enough to give me parallel edges. Since I was using scrap 1/2-inch plywood for the leg bracing, I cut a rabbet along both sides of each leg. Of course, I messed this up too and ended up having to recut one side of each leg. Originally, I didn't take into account that the legs were rectangles, not squares, so I lost a little beef on the legs, but thankfully it didn't really have much impact on the final product. I cut the legs to final length on the table saw using the crosscut sled, and I used the same process on the 1/2-inch plywood. I used the sled because I needed to make sure the ends were perfect 90s. I also had to finagle a temporary stop block to accommodate the length of the plywood pieces. For the pieces that were going to act as aprons, I drilled pocket holes that would be used later to attach the base to the top. Because this base may be very temporary, I didn't use any glue or nails, just screws. On one side of the base, the bottom bracing was placed to accommodate the dust collection hose for the table saw. Then I centered the base on the bottom and screwed the base into place. T-nuts on the bottom of the legs gives me the adjustability I need to match the height of the table saw. This is necessary for use as an outfeed table. As workpieces come off the saw, you want it fully supported with no possibility the workpiece will want to tip up away from the blade before you're finished with the cut. A coat of poly and some light sanding, and this thing is ready to go. This table is great for me because it's not only a great outfeed table, but also gives me a solution to the annoying problem of having a place to keep the tools you're using out of the way. But this design allows me to clamp from the edge and clamp in the middle of the table, and that is super useful during assemblies. I hope this gives you some ideas for your shop. Feel free to leave a comment, and your day will improve considerably if you subscribe to this channel and share this video with your friends. Thanks for watching, and there you go.